Hey guys, welcome back to Bigger Health Talks. I'm your co-host Mo. Do you ever wonder why New Jersey is called the Garden State? In today's episode, we had the honor of interviewing Dave, owner of Sprout. He's going to give you all your tips and tricks on how to grow the best garden.
If you don't mind, maybe you could just go over your background, kind of who you are, what you are, and then what it is you do to help folks now.
Sure. So I'm a landscape designer by trade. Started out as a gardener. I have a design, construction, and garden care company. So we build gardens, we do natural stonework, we do a lot of things. But the focus is really on ecology, is reboosting ecology, bringing it back. Um, I've been gardening since I was about 16 years old. I'm 40 now, so it's been a while. My mother is a gardener and landscape designer. She learned to garden as a child from her father, who was in World War II, came back, planted a victory garden, and she's been gardening ever since. And um, I did a little bit with her when I was a child. We'd plant flowers for like my grandmother and things like that. And then when I was in high school, one day she said, I need help. So she just started her own gardening business, and she said, "You and your friends, you're gonna come help me." So she grabbed me and a friend, one of my closest friends, and we started gardening. And actually, it's funny because I hated it at first. I'm a 16-year-old boy. I want to be out with my friends. I want to be skateboarding, and my mom needed help, so I went and I helped her. And of course, she paid us. Back then it was like $8 an hour, so
Yeah.
it's not much, but it was enough. And we were pulling weeds and things, and I remember saying one day, you know, I hate pulling these weeds. I'm going to do such a bad job. She's never going to make me do it again.
Yeah.
Nope. She came right back and she said, "This is terrible. You missed this. You missed that. Get all those weeds. And then, we can move on." So, all right. All right. Um, and then, one day, my friend and I were getting bigger, we're getting older. She said, "Okay, now you guys are going to help me plant," because she would hire other companies, other service like landscapers to help her plant gardens. She said, let's plant a garden. Let's see how you guys do. So we planted a garden, and we maintained the gardens. So we started planting more and maintaining them as we go. And after a year or two of just maintaining these gardens, even I probably before that, like within the first few months, I think maybe 6 months of planting something, of getting your hands in the dirt and creating something, and then going back and maintaining it and watching it grow, and knowing that I took part in this garden's health and I made this garden what it is. That something clicked, something changed inside of me, and I started really developing this connection with nature. I've always kind of had it. My father's an acupuncturist, has been since I was a child. My mother was a gardener, and I lived in Montclair by Mills Reservation, so I used to go into the woods a lot, and hang out. But I didn't have just this deep connection, the understanding of how things really work in nature, which I think is a part of what you're saying about medicine. Being it's we've got more medicine, but somehow we got less. It's
Mhm.
the disconnect, right?
Mhm.
And we're so disconnected with the planet, with what's going on with nature. And I just started realizing, how things work. It's we people always say, "I want a maintenance-free garden." There's no such thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Plants need care. And I came to a property. There's one, and the estate section of Montclair, and the landscape was kind of ignored for many years. The previous owner was just they had a beautiful garden, but they got really busy. They were traveling a lot. They just neglected it and it fell apart. And the new owner then hired us, and we didn't even really do much at first. We just kind of cleaned it up and started getting it going, and the garden started coming back, giving it care, giving it attention, showing it some love. It started coming back. And that's a big part of it, is that nature nurtures us, but we also have to nurture nature,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's just that's what really got me involved in it and got me to understand like what I was doing and how important it was. But then in, I'd say, 2005 or 6, I learned about colony collapse disorder. And with colony collapse disorder, that's they started talking about just like what 150 crops that the US grows that rely, most of our fruits and our grains rely on pollinators. something like 1,400 worldwide crops, almost everything. 80% of our food comes, is on our plate because of pollinators.
Mm-hmm.
And that just got me really thinking there has to be something we can do because, it's funny. Everybody's scared of bees, right? People
Mm-hmm.
say, I want to pollinate a garden, but not too close to here and not there. Oh, what if the bees, the bees aren't going to bother you.
Mm-hmm.
When I would you're cleaning something like lavender, it's a heavy pollinator attractant. And when you're cleaning a lavender plant, there's bees all around you. But if you don't bother them, they're not going to bother you, and it's like I started developing this connection with the bees as if they know that I'm doing something because, what we would do, a lot of it is called deadheading, right? When you're taking off the spent flowers so that more flowers bloom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's almost as if they know that what I'm doing is now going to bring in more flowers. So they're like, oh, this guy is one of us,
Wow. Okay.
So, that just got me down a path. And, my mom had vegetable gardens since I was a little kid. I remember, one of my first memories of being like 3 or 4 years old is running through the vegetable garden. And as soon as I got my first apartment where I had a backyard, I planted a vegetable garden. I got really into it and realized how important it was. I was raised vegetarian.
Mhm.
I'm not vegetarian anymore. My one grandmother is Jewish and the other's Puerto Rican, so meat was very important,
Sure.
and
Sure.
I loved it. But I started learning about too. Part of agriculture is also animal husbandry,
Sure.
right? So, it's really important if you start looking into the way that regenerative farming works, how important regenerative farming is. That's horticulture. That's the connection of earth, the animal, and us,
Mhm.
right? So, all those things just kind of led me down this path. And my company is called Sprout Farms and Gardens. The name Sprout, that's kind of a long story. It was my sister's idea. We tried to start this farm to table cafe. The town wouldn't let us get the zoning that we needed. So we tried to run it as kind of a farm stand and nursery, and I did landscape design, and it just wasn't enough. So we closed it. But that really got me going into more agriculture stuff too. And the reason we call it Farms and Gardens is not because I'm not a farmer, but I started building vegetable gardens for people, and that was just, to me, that was something that I really wanted to focus on. I wanted to help people build their own vegetable gardens. There's something so satisfying about it,
Mhm.
and people, it's very hard to go into the garden, not a vegetable garden, but a regular flower garden, and you have a bunch of different plants, and to know what to do and to understand and to even do the work is tough. But you can have a very small little patch of land and you can have a small vegetable garden. You can have a few tomatoes and a few cucumbers, and you're going to gain so much out of just working with those things, and not only is your produce going to be healthier, right? Because, you know, vegetables are the most nutrient dense when they're picked ripe,
Mhm.
right? You get something from the supermarket that was picked not ripe. It was often ripened with ethylene gas,
Mhm.
so it's not dense in nutrients. It's been now sitting on a shelf with less nutrients, and as it decays, it becomes even less nutritious.
Mhm.
So you get something off the plant. Not only do you get the excitement of I grew something, I grew this, but you're also getting a healthier piece of produce.
Mhm.
So it's really the farms. It's not my farm. It's everybody else's farm that we're building. So that's what a lot of it is. And we found, well, that really it's the kids' farms, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So the only vegetable gardens that we even have right now are ones where there's children involved.
Mhm.
Um, and I noticed how important that is. I saw it because, the kids were getting involved. The kids were getting excited about it. We have one client where they're not vegetarian, but their son's a vegetarian. He's like 8 years old. He's a vegetarian,
Yeah.
voluntarily. And, so he said, I like this vegetable. I like that vegetable. And we started planting all different things.
Yeah.
So he'd figure out what he would like. And, got really into it. He got really into it. And it shows the kids where your food comes from. It teaches them the value of
Yeah.
nutrition and the value of growing things. And it gives them that connection that I gained when I was 16 years old.
That's pretty incredible. Listening to like your personal journey that got you here and how you made it. I mean, the common thread is the connection with nature, right? And uh, kind of how you're furthering kind of your passion and helping nature and people understanding it. That's a beautiful thing. I wonder, I think most people are like me that understand some of what you're saying and agree with basically all of it, but kind of don't know where to start. And
Right.
I mean, for an expert like you, that might seem crazy, but like, just if someone's listening and watching, or someone like me says, I agree with that, but like, where do I start? Like, do I call a guy like you and you come in with your people and you start it and you teach me, or can you just walk us through? I don't have any garden. I don't have whatever. My family loves the idea. We always complain about crappy nutrition or lack of nutrition. And we've always, once a year we discuss something like this, then life gets in the way. What's step 1, 2, and 3?
Right. So I mean, we do different various levels for people. One is that we come in, we plant the garden, we maintain the garden, you pick the produce. At the highest level, we'll pick produce for you as well. A lot of our clients, we have some people that are doctors and psychologists and lawyers and things, and they're very busy. So we'll pick things for them and leave them at their doorstep. But a lot of people like to do it themselves. So we'll just come in and we'll build it. But I also do consulting. I'll come in and I'll just consult, and the biggest mistake that people make when gardening, often a lot of our clients, want a garden and they say, oh, I have a black thumb. It's like, no, you don't have a black thumb. You just didn't know, right? Like you said, where to start exactly. So one of the biggest mistakes is not knowing your light requirements, right? A lot of people say, oh yeah, at 12 o'clock, this gets full sun.
Mhm.
It's like, well, just at 12 o'clock? They say, yeah, from like 12 to 2, full sun. That's not full sun. That's actually shade,
Mhm.
right? So,
Why? Because it's a limited amount of time, you
it's a
mean?
limited amount of time.
Okay.
So shade plants are good with anywhere from, a deep shade plant, like a hosta can stand being in no sun, all the way to like 6 hours. 4 to 6 hours is like considered shade. Anywhere from 4 to 8 hours is considered part sun. Anywhere from 6 to 12 hours is considered full sun.
And what, some
Right.
vegetables fall in certain categories, or?
A majority of your vegetables are going to be full sun.
Okay.
So they need 6 to 8 hours. You'll get tomatoes to actually bloom and create fruit with, you can get them in 6 hours. I've seen people on, their balcony in Brooklyn where they don't even they face north, they get no sun, getting, you'll get some tomatoes, but you're not going to get as much, but you'll still get some. But there's the things that you will get in less sun are leafy greens. You'll get, kale works good. Swiss chard, broccoli works good, spinach, a lot of your herbs, your herbs like thyme and oregano and things like that, they're considered woody, they're tough, they come back every year. Those need a little more sun. They will start to peter out eventually. But that's really the starting point, is to understand your sun. So the first thing somebody should do when they want to have a vegetable garden is look at their yard in the morning and try to follow it. Maybe on a Saturday if you're working, or a Sunday, go to see where does the sun start and for how long and where's the most sun. So that's your spot where the most sun is. And if you don't have sun, then you have to start dialing it back. Okay, what plants can I grow with this amount of sun? So that's the first step, is understanding your sun requirements.
That's interesting. Okay.
Another thing people don't consider is soil.
Mhm.
And that's kind of something I'd like to get into as well, because that's the beginning of all health, right? That's the
Mhm.
beginning of everything,
Mhm.
is the soil. And so, knowing your soil, knowing, do I have clay soil? Do I have sandy soil? Do I have, heavy organic content? That's going to be a big difference, because, when you read something online, it's like a blanket statement,
Mhm.
right? It's not, if you have this, if you have that, it's just, water your vegetable garden,
Right.
every 2 days.
Right.
Well, if you have heavy clay soil, you're going to drown your plants. If you have heavy sand, it's not going to be enough. So you have to understand that as well. So there's things to understand, things to look at. For testing soil and understanding your soil, Rutgers has a soil testing lab. That's who I use. Rutgers Soil Testing Lab is who everybody should always use, I think, in my opinion. You send in a soil sample. They have instructions on the website. You fill out a questionnaire, and they have a section for vegetable gardening. And they have different options of what you want to learn. You can even learn the microbial content in your soil, the organic matter in your soil. Like, you don't need to know all that stuff. One thing that I would suggest is, if you're trying to grow a vegetable garden near your house, especially if you have an older house, you should test for lead. So they do a lead screening. Lead is not necessarily a bad thing in your soil. Tomatoes are not going to absorb lead, but mustard greens, things like that, a lot of leafy greens can absorb it, right? They use that for phytoremediation in some sites, especially mustard greens. So you have to be a little careful there. But with lead, if you do have a high lead concentration in your soil, what happens is, you're digging in the dirt, so you're getting it on your hands. So you have to wear gloves and be careful. But also from rain and water, when you go to pick a tomato, a lot of times if it's a lower piece of fruit, it's going to have dirt on it. So you have to just be more cautious when washing it. You don't have to worry necessarily that something's going to be absorbed. Do research. You should do research on it. But, that's kind of the basis of where to start. And if you do hire us to consult, we'll figure all that out for you. And then, we'll come in, we'll plant things based on what you like. But, if people want to do it themselves, really, those are the main things that you have to do. You have to know what you want to grow, and then you have to figure out if you can grow it there. Right.
And then you get like seeds, and like, how does that process
So you
work?
can, that's where it gets really fun. So, that's like the most exciting thing. My sister, she also has been gardening since we were kids, working for our mother, and she has a cut flower business. And so she has, these giant gardens for cutting flowers and things, and she grows her own seeds, and she gets so excited. She posts them on Instagram, it's watching them, and it's hard. It is hard. She's better at it than I am, and I have a big greenhouse, and she just does it indoors. But seed saving is another thing. People can save their seeds if you buy an heirloom product. So heirloom, when you buy an heirloom tomato, what that means is that tomato, like a Cherokee purple tomato, that tomato has been grown for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Some things come from old world Italy, these varieties, and they save their seeds. So you just can't cross pollinate, right? So like a tomato, for example, pollen can travel about 50 feet or so. So if you grow two tomatoes next to each other of different varieties, they're going to cross pollinate. You're going to get something different.
Oh, wow.
So you can't save that seed, right? So you have to grow them separate. So just, we recommend doing like one at a time. So if you're going to grow like, the purple Cherokee, which is my personal favorite, you can, you can save the seeds, but you have to only grow that one in a small garden.
Okay.
So that's when people get excited about it, and then you have to have light and water, and you have to pay attention, but they're like your little children, you start it, you start to grow it, that's a lot of the clients we have that have children, young children, they come home with seeds. Somebody I just planted, what was it? I think Monday or Tuesday. Yeah, it was Monday. We planted some zinnias, some flowers. She didn't even know what it was. Just her kids brought these things home. They grew them in class. The kids were excited about it, and we planted it. And it is exciting. And so that's one way you can do it. But most people, you just go buy it. I mean, I would recommend that you go. Like in our area, there's Rossler's Allendale Nursery is really great, really good vegetable selection, very knowledgeable staff. There's also Stonebrook Nursery. They have a really great selection as well. Look for things. You can look for things that are organic. When it's young, it almost doesn't matter as much if it's organic or not. So by the time, your soil is going to be organic, right? You're not putting anything into it. So, by the time it's ready to be picked, it's going to be organic.
Right.
Unless you throw some kind of inorganic pesticide or inorganic fertilizers on it. But yeah, it's you just buy the plants to start and try it out.
Can you talk a little bit about like, because I have a few questions, and then Mo, you could ask whatever questions folks have, but I have a bunch of questions like the pesticides, the like things that like as somebody who doesn't know this stuff, like I got landscapers that I'm sure they use pesticides for weeds or whatever. They use fertilizer. Where can you explain? So in the gardens that you guys do, you completely avoid that, or sometimes you use it. Can you talk about I'm sure they're generally inappropriate, but is there a place for them?
100%.
Okay.
Yes. So that's a deep question. But the real difference between it is, so there are people think that organic means no pesticides. I see that all the time.
Yeah.
I've seen it on TV. I've seen it in the news. You see it everywhere. That's false. I don't know where that came from. That is 100% false. Neem oil comes from the neem tree. It's organic. It can be organic anyway. It's often cut. It's cut with other things. You'll see like 70% or 80% neem when you buy a package, a bottle. But if it's organic neem oil, that's a pesticide. But the thing is that it kills everything. Like so, inorganic pesticides, conventional pesticides, they're not organic. And it's just the molecule, right? They're not carbon based. It's the way it's. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to try to break all that down. But when you look at produce, especially, and I'd like to talk about this about horticulture as well in the landscape. But when you look at a farm and you're looking at a conventional tomato versus an organic tomato, right? There's conventional tomato is most likely grown with petrochemical fertilizers, right? Petroleum-based fertilizers, or they could be
And
natural
what
gas.
explain like even fertilizer, like when, where, why, how, like just the fundamentals.
Right. So plants need food as well,
Right.
right? They need nutrients. They don't just get
Beyond water and
sunlight,
sun.
beyond water and sun. They'll
Right.
do fine with water and sun, but they'll do a lot better, especially produce and things like that, and flowers, things that are like a flower that's blooming heavy, or annuals, things that you plant every year, they bloom really heavy. So they're spending what's in the soil. In the soil, you have basically, to not get too deep into the chemistry, there's something called soil colloids, right? And they're just these pieces of organic matter that hold on to elements. A plant needs, it needs ions, right? It can't absorb compounds. The plant needs things to be in ionic form, right? So it needs nitrogen, just nitrogen by itself to be able to absorb it through the roots. So in the soil, there's water, right? And there's water, so everything's kind of floating in the water, and the soil colloids, they hold on to different nutrients and they'll keep them in that area. As the plant absorbs them, there becomes less, right? There's less of them. So then the plant, as if they're growing really fast, like a tomato plant, they're growing, they're blooming, they're doing all these things. They use up all those nutrients that are available to them. So you have to replace them, especially if you're doing it year after year after year, you're doing the same thing in the same space. So you have to replace it. They need, something like 90 different elemental, micronutrients. They need the macros, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen helps them grow, creates leafy green growth. So you use that first. And then they need phosphorus, which helps them form flowers. It helps them function. And potassium, I believe it's for like moving things throughout the plant. It helps things go from cell to cell, right? To cross boundaries and to move it. So they need all these things. You find them, people think manure is fertilizer. Manure is not really fertilizer. Manure is more about being a soil conditioner. There is nitrogen in it. There's things in it, but it's a soil conditioner. So there's microbes in your soil. Now the microbes, this is where the difference between conventional or organic really, to me, gets to be something of importance, because the soil microbes are responsible for breaking apart those compounds, right? You take a piece of wood, for example, and it's got nutrients in it, but they're not available to the plant. They have to be broken down, right? So they need funguses, they need microbes, soil microbes, they need bacteria, they need things, they need insects, they need bugs, they need things, worms, to break it down and to excrete it as an ion, right? In ionic form, as the simplest form, as an element. And without that, the plant has nothing to absorb. So what happens when you use conventional fertilizers? They're, as I said, they're made from petroleum-based products. Sometimes they're like the leftover products from coal, the coke, and they'll be they use things from natural gas, and they mix them from atmospheric nitrogen. They create urea, and these things, they destroy the soil. They deplete the soil of everything, and they kill the microbes. Microbes can't eat this stuff. They can't live on this stuff. But if you use an organic fertilizer, a granular, this company Espama, they're the best. And they have, it's chicken manure, it's dried blood, which is nitrogen, it's bone meal, which is phosphorus, it's feather meal, it's kelp, which has, in the ocean, you have like all of those micronutrients floating in perfect harmony. So you start harvesting seaweed and kelp and things, so you get all that in there. They also have mycorrhizal fungi, which are a fungus that attaches to the roots of many plants, and then they help absorb. They exchange. Um, I believe it's that like they're exchanging sugars,
Hmm.
right, for nutrients. So they'll absorb nutrients and they'll absorb water, and they feed it to the roots, and the plant gives them sugar, and this just this exchange that they do. So when you're fertilizing with organics, you're really boosting up the soil, you're boosting up the plants naturally. You're working with nature, right? You're
Hmm.
feeding the microbes more. And by adding manure, by adding compost, you're adding microbes. That's what
Hmm.
you're doing. You're adding more life to the soil. There's
Hmm.
there's more living organisms in a cup of soil than there are people on the planet,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
So that's such an important role that they play in the health of a plant. All plants,
Hmm.
not just vegetables. Everything needs this. The bigger a tree gets, the bigger a plant gets, the more they spread their roots, the less we need to fertilize them. A lot of times we don't even. But when things are young, when things are small, absolutely, you have to kind of keep up on that if you really want a garden to look good. We usually fertilize things in the spring. We'll put organic fertilizers down. You mix it into the soil, you wet it to get it going, and it keeps everything just looking really healthy. And so the conventional ones, what they're doing is so a tomato farmer, right? If they are, like I don't want to name names of companies, but if they're, a conventional farmer, they're growing tomatoes. That's it. It's a monocrop.
Hmm.
All they're growing is tomatoes on the same field, same soil every year. They're depleting the soil. They're boosting it up with petrochemical fertilizers, and the plant. That's what the plant's getting. And you're not getting as many nutrients. You're not getting as many good things. You're killing the planet. I don't know if you ever heard that we have something like 60 years of topsoil left. There's a
Yeah.
thing going around, right? So, a lot of it, that's what a lot of it is about. It's about we're killing the topsoil. That's what the
Yeah.
Dust Bowl was. Everything just blew away. There's no life there,
Right.
right?
Right. Okay.
So, and conventional farming when it comes to animals, it's the same. Not conventional. I'm sorry. When you're doing regenerative farming, when it comes
Right.
to animals, what they're doing is they're taking cattle and they're grazing them on the grass.
Right.
And then they're following that up with chickens. And the chickens are now, everything is dropping manure. The chickens are eating the bugs. They're scratching up the soil. And then they're following it up maybe with some goats. And then they let it go for a year. They let it go fallow for a year. And it will, a lot of times they'll put a cover crop, maybe something like legumes, like peas or something that then are considered nitrogen fixing. So that's another way of adding organically adding nitrogen to the soil is you use a cover crop because it pulls the nitrogen out of the ground and it pulls it atmospherically, and then it holds it in its roots and in its tubers, and then you break it up and you kill it and it decays, and then you added nitrogen. It's like what compost, everybody's like, oh, my grass compost, right? You take, but that's the other thing about compost. You need to mix in leaves and you mix in grass
Hmm.
because as they break down, they're breaking down different things. Greens usually turn into nitrogen. Browns usually turn into phosphorus. You have to mix them together. So, it's all natural, and that's really the way to go. It's
Let me ask you, because you made that's like super informative. I think that's really helpful. Um, I have a couple because I have heard monocrop said,
mhm,
and I think I understand. It's like when you do one thing, right? Like it's
mhm.
just tomatoes or whatever. Can you explain? And then you said something about the animals. I'm going to get to that, but can you just explain a little more clearly what's so bad about monocropping? And are you on a practical basis? Are you saying if I have like a little garden at home, I shouldn't just do tomato. I shouldn't just do cucumbers. I should deliberately, if I have a garden like whatever, like this big or whatever, I should make sure that I have different fruits and vegetables.
Mhm. Yeah. So, really, it's about what the plants are taking, right? So the nutrients that they're absorbing from the soil, but also a lot of it. This comes back to the pesticide conversation. Is that um, if you get a powdery mildew or a blight or something like that in a field, you can spray it a ton, and get rid of it, but then it can keep coming back. So what organic farmers do, one of their best practices to keep away, different pathogens and different funguses and things is to do what's called crop rotation. So even in your home garden, right? This year you're going to put your tomatoes over here, you're going to put your peppers here, and you're going to put your cucumbers here. Next year, you're going to put your tomatoes here, you're going to put your peppers there, and your cucumbers over here. So you keep rotating it so that if some of the leaves fall down that have a fungus, they're not going to infect the plant again the next year. so that the nutrients are dispersed differently. There's other things. Companion planting is really important. And there's a book, Carrots Love Tomatoes. Uh, Something like that. It's about companion planting. It's roses love garlic, and I think carrots love tomatoes. But it's, you hear old Italian guys love to, these old Italian guys love to grow their tomatoes. They always grow it with basil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just because tomatoes and basil grow together, but because they're companion plants. They work
Okay.
together. Plants, it's like a natural defense mechanism. We don't really understand it, but plants release different pheromones, right? Sometimes when a plant is being attacked by aphids, they'll release a pheromone that will attract ants, because ants will farm aphids. They'll take the aphids. The aphids secrete a dew that is sweet, so ants like that. So they'll take them. That's a whole nother world to
Wow.
get into. But crop rotation is very important for many reasons. A big part of it is not having like another fungus come in or something else, but it's also just changing up the soil. But companion planting is very important because some plants give off pheromones that other ones don't like,
Mhm.
right? So you can put things together that they won't like, right? Roses love garlic because they work well together. They give off something that the other one likes. Or marigolds is another one. Marigolds will ward off some insects, but also they'll attract some other insects that will then not go to your plants, right?
If you have a garden at home, like when I go outside, there's deer, there's like rabbits, there's stuff. So if you have a garden, how do you, I mean, that's produce. It's going to potentially attract animals that can mess it up for you. What's a practical way somebody wants to make a garden at home, from whether it's small like critters all the way to like bigger animals, of protecting it?
That's the biggest problem we have, especially these days, where we're taking a lot of the land and we're leaving just enough for them to all
Right.
keep populating.
Right.
Um, it's really, fences, chicken wire, there's repellents and things you can use as well. People do all sorts of things. As far as using oils, peppermint oil, lemongrass oil, things like that. But really fencing it in, is really the best thing you can do. And deer can jump a 6-foot fence. So you
Yeah.
really have to be a little bit higher. Groundhogs and rabbits, you just bury the chicken wire. You need a fence. That's really what it comes down to. If you don't want to be spraying all different things or doing all these different things to it.
Okay. And then can you say a few words about or do you not, do you ever work with people who are raising animals, like raising chicken or raising,
I've had
live?
some clients that raise chickens. In Montclair, you're allowed to do it. So, but not many. It's not easy. You have to be attentive. They're just like your dogs. Somebody has to take
Right.
care of them if you're not there,
Right.
right? So, they can be tough. But I don't have a lot of experience with doing that myself.
So do you like, is all your food homegrown more or less? Like,
No, I wish. No,
or do you
I
go
don't
out
even
and
have
eat
time
or
for it.
what?
Yeah, it's the shoemaker's children, right? My
Yeah,
garden is
exactly.
the worst. One of my gardens in my main backyard is just cobbled together with whatever this plant was left over, that plant was left over.
Yeah.
I probably, I have maybe 100 different plants in my backyard, and I paid for maybe 2 of them just
Right.
because that's the one. Oh, I saw this and I really like it, so I got it.
Right.
But most of it's just like leftover stuff. And my vegetable garden is a planter box, actually, because the space that I did have a testing when I first bought my property. We bought this property in Teaneck that has a really long backyard, and I have about 5,000 square feet dedicated to the business. And the business was smaller when we bought it in 2018. And I was able to have a big vegetable garden, and I did a testing plot. So I was growing a lot of heirloom stuff and seeing what worked really well, because that's the other thing about heirlooms, right? If you're going to grow an heirloom plant, you have to know how well it grows in your area. So Baker's Creek heirlooms is one of the best, seed catalogs you can get. And you can go and look through the comments, and people will say what region they're in, how well it did in that region, what it did in that region. And so that's very important, because these plants, a hybrid tomato, like a Sweet 100, or something like that, they're grown to be grown everywhere. And you
Okay.
can't save those seeds. If you grow a hybrid tomato, you're not going to get the same tomato. That's like 6 different things combined into one,
Okay.
hybridized. Yeah, so, I was growing this test plot of all these different vegetables, seeing what worked well, what did good.
Right.
So that now is got trucks, it's got trailers, it's got a
Sure.
greenhouse, it's got sheds. So I have just a very small little planter box. I mean, it's maybe 20 feet long by a foot wide that we
Okay.
have squash, we have tomatoes, cucumbers, all the herbs we need.
What's your favorite meal?
My favorite meal? That's a tough one, but probably it's a toss up
Okay.
between my grandmother made arroz con pollo, chicken and rice. That
Sure.
was like my number one. And she make it with chayote and yuca and things like that.
Yeah.
And then my other grandmother, the Jewish one, would make this brisket that was like, for me, the best. And what's funny is they both made really great chicken soup that was almost identical.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So
That's
like,
interesting.
yeah, but I mean, when I cook though,
Yeah.
as I said, I was raised vegetarian. That's mostly what my parents taught me to cook.
Yeah.
I mostly cook vegetables.
Oh,
Like
you
if my
do?
wife's
Yeah.
not home,
Okay.
I'll throw on a piece of steak or a chicken or something like that, but I'll mostly cook vegetables,
Yeah.
make a big stir fry or I'll grill things up. I have my wife bought me for my birthday, she bought me a smoker, a side set
Nice.
smoker. And so I'll grill on that because it's got the grill part with the side set. And then I'll actually, in the smoker part, I'll cook on wood. I'll wood fire it up and I'll roast my vegetables that way. That's how I like to do it, especially squash, like zucchini.
Yeah.
That's the best.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So Mo, do you have a few
Yeah, I have
questions?
a couple
This was
questions.
great, huh?
Yeah, it was
It's a
excellent.
world that I mean, do you know this world?
No, not at all.
No, right?
Yeah,
we
it's
gotta
It's a very
I
different
was picking
world.
his brain a little bit before you came.
yeah. We gotta get on this.
Just a couple questions I had. Someone asked, I feel it's hard to connect with nature when living in the city. What are the best ways to feel more in tune?
It's a good question.
That is a good question. So I do a lot of city work as well. And really, I mean, going to a park, it depends on the size of your living space, right? So if you have a small apartment, you can have a ton of plants. My cousin growing up, one of his best friends' father, they lived in the meat market district, of Manhattan. And his father had so many plants everywhere, just, all these house plants. And, you just have to, again, it goes back to the light, right?
Okay.
It's one
So
of
you
the
can
most
do it
important things.
indoors.
So you can, with lights, you can grow whatever you want, but
Artificial lights.
artificial lights, you can kind of grow whatever you want. It gets really tough, but like, doing plants, house plants. I mean, spider plant, for example, is, it has, it's air purifying, right? And there's succulents that are air purifying. So
Okay.
they're cleaning your air as well as giving you peace of mind,
Sure.
So that's pretty much the best thing you can do in a small apartment but you have to get the right plants. You have to know what plants will work with your light, right? How many windows do you have? Where do they face? You got to understand that. My aunt is amazing with plants. Her whole house is like inside and out, but her whole house is like a rainforest.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
she's always says, you have to put it in a window and see how it does. If it's not doing good, put it in the next window,
And you
see how
titrate,
it does.
yeah.
And you keep moving it
Yeah.
until you figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's key, But if you have a little terrace, fire escape. We have people that grow things on fire escapes.
Sure.
And they do well. You got to be careful, right? It's kind of a fire hazard,
Yeah.
so you don't want to go crazy. But doing things like that, being a part of a garden club in the city,
Right.
there's so many different community gardens. That's big. Community gardens and talking about health, as far as social health, right?
Yeah,
Loneliness, joining
yeah.
a community garden will really boost that.
Yeah, for sure.
People take care of each other's gardens. People
Yeah.
work together. People make friends. They share seeds,
Yeah.
right? If they're doing that kind of thing, they share plants. A lot of times people say, "Oh, I have 2 of these left over. Do you want it?" So that's really big. Is getting involved in a community garden, just going to a good park. Finding a good park.
That's a good way to do it because we have members that live in New Jersey and we have members in Manhattan and we have members in Brooklyn.
Yep.
So we see it all. Like the Jersey, we have folks. We have one location in Clifton which borders Montclair.
Mhm.
So and Paramus and this area there's a little bit more opportunity,
Yeah.
but in the city it's difficult.
Yeah.
Next question someone asked, knowing when something is in season, when do you know something is in season? Is it better to eat vegetables when they're in season or not in season?
Yeah. So definitely better to eat things that are in season for what I explained before about being picked at peak ripeness, right? You want something that is
Can you define ripeness?
Um, so I would say, without being a textbook definition, when a tomato is about to fall off the plant,
Okay.
right? That's like peak ripe. That's maybe a little too ripe, right? But when it's just right, you just
Best version of
know.
itself.
Yeah, exactly. You just know before it starts, because a, a vegetable, all it is it's a seed. It's a seed pod. That's
Right.
what a vegetable is,
Right.
right? All plants have seeds,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's just about how most of them reproduce. And it starts as a flower.
Mhm.
And what's interesting, people don't know, is that if that flower gets damaged in any way, you're not going to get a fruit out of it. If it doesn't get pollinated, you're not going to get a fruit. For a majority of them. But it's trying to make seeds, and you want to get it before it makes too many. Like a cucumber, you can get a cucumber to grow this big.
Right.
It's not going to be good.
Right.
Right. So you have to kind of, the way we know is, does it look like it looks like in the supermarket, but,
Right.
but as far as seasonally, going to your local farmer's market, that's the best way. Talking to your farmer, getting to know him, knowing what he's growing, because if something is grown, even if it's grown in California, that tomato was not picked ripe. That tomato was picked green, and then it was turned red, usually through ethylene gas or just, from the trip. Because a ripe tomato is not going to survive that trip, right? It's not going to survive in a container or a big box truck. So going to your local farmer's market is the best way to go.
Gotcha. And that leads into my next question. Someone asked, what's your favorite farmer's market in North Jersey?
That's tough. The Montclair farmer's market is really good. Yeah, I'm going to stick with that one. The Montclair.
How about
I
farm to
love
table
it.
restaurants that you go to?
There's not many anymore. There have been a few, but as far as ones that, there's that restaurant now in was that in Premise or Hackensack right off of Route 4? I forget what it's called, but that's kind of their theme. I haven't tried it yet. My wife and I keep talking about it. We haven't tried it yet.
I haven't tried it.
But yeah,
Farmers markets or grocery stores?
farmers market. I mean, I shop at grocery stores because I don't have time. Unfortunately, most like I live in Teaneck, our farmers market's on Thursday. Like, why?
Yeah.
I can't make it. I can't.
Like in the middle of the day.
Yeah, I can't take off of work to go buy tomatoes. It's tough.
Next question. Someone asked, is New Jersey actually the garden state, in quotes they put?
I mean, it's not called the Jersey tomato for nothing, right? But yeah, one of the best things you can eat is fresh Jersey corn. Go to a farmer's market, get a piece of corn that was picked that day. You do not need to cook it. It is the most amazing thing. And corn, within 3 or 4 days, the sugars start turning to starches. Then you have to cook it. It doesn't taste good anymore. It's almost inedible, raw. But a piece of freshly picked raw corn is amazing.
We got to try that for Yad's house one day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, big corn guy.
That's all I got for tonight.
Well, this was like super informative.
Great.
You're doing great stuff, man.
Yeah.
Very different. Learned a lot.
Learned a lot.
I learned a lot about
This is
plants.
exactly the type of stuff that needs to be like
Just out there.
dispensed, disseminated, that people don't get enough of. And the duality, like it's fresh, it's organic, and that's huge. But the connection between us and earth that nurtures us and taking care of it and it takes care of us is definitely lost. I mean, that's way lost. Even like you said, like I could be detached from, the planet and find a farmer's market, but that, you see people who do that, but this connection with the earth and having kids, it starts with the kids, like develop that relationship. That's what happened with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this because they're the roots, for lack of a better term, were planted when you were a child, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's something now, like I'm going to think about with my own kids, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. Every now and then I get this like, get this hint, this smell, when you're gardening of just good, rich soil, and it brings me back to childhood.
Yeah.
It's that like smelling grandma's chicken soup.
Yeah.
If you get your hands dirty early enough, when you smell it, you'll know,
That's great, man. Well, can't thank you enough for doing this. We appreciate it, and we
Yeah.
got to do it again soon.
Yeah.
100%.
I'd love to come back and talk more
We'd
about
love to hear more. Yeah.
about really gardening more, because that's really what's lost on people.
Yeah.
Is planting with native plants is it's very misunderstood, but it really needs to be done more. And just understanding what we're looking at.
Mhm.
People don't know what they're looking at when they're looking at a plant. And we're destroying our ecology. We're
Yeah.
destroying our environment, just one house at a time by
Yep.
building these developments and putting in the same 5 plants that aren't even from this area.
Right.
There's really a lot we can get into with the health of the planet and the health of us, because if
Yes.
our ecosystem collapses, so does us. So
Yep.
do we, right?
That's the next time we get together.
Yep, 100%.
Well, thank you, man.
Yeah. Thank you.